How's it going? I'm IlaGolden and welcome to my vlog. Alright, this is going to be the weird one today. She says, like the others have been completely normal. At the end of last one I said this would be, about dreams and nightmares and how they'd sort of influenced my work. Sort of the main reason I wanted to get into that is, as I've mentioned at least once before now, there was a nightmare that I had sort of when I was like 8-ish, 7, 8-ish, that had a big impact on my writing and on the kind of things I write, and I'm not totally convinced I wouldn't be a fantasy writer if this particular nightmare hadn't happened. So yeah, it seems like a good place to start. But at the same time, even though I probably should look at it as having been a nightmare, and even when I'd sort of woken up, I'd sort of felt it should have been a nightmare. There wasn't that sort of fear. There wasn't that sort of that kind of response to it. It excited me. I don't know what that says about 7-year-old me, but yeah. So I think if I'm going to talk about in any particular detail, that's what I'm going to do. Remember, it's been a long time since I actually had it, and talking about dreams is weird anyway, so I'm just going to overview it as basically as I can. And so from what I remember of it, and what's always stuck with me, is that it was about a school trip where for some reason we were staying overnight in another school. I don't know, I don't get it. Dream logic. And opposite this particular school there was this old building, which was where we were actually going for the school trip, and again, dream logic. And during the course of the dream, everybody in the class gets kidnapped and experimented on by this crazy scientist that you meet at the end of the dream. And the result of his experimentation is basically the ability to turn into animals at will. So you can sort of like see why it was sort of a nightmare and sort of not a nightmare. I mean, I can remember details about it, like just how creepy the building was, and the scientist's lab was like, what you get in like those old horror movies, like, Dr. Frankenstein's lab type thing, but crossed with a torture chamber. A 7-year-old me had a weird imagination, clearly. So yeah, that essentially, in its very, very basic context, was the sort of dream. And some of the influence, is kind of obvious when you know the first thing about my work, which a lot of you don't. So the whole turning into animals thing does get utilised in my work. There is a particular breed who do have the ability to turn into particular animals, and so yeah, that idea sort of carried forward, and I had a lot of characters certainly around that time which were either humanized animals. I know there's a proper word for it, but I can't think of what it is right now. It'll come to me. Animals with like human qualities, and can walk on 2 legs and stuff like that. Or they were that sort of werewolf type quality where they, certain conditions would turn them into animals, until eventually I came to creating the particular breed and its rules and its variations as well, because obviously alternate realities, you get variations on certain things. So yeah, that was sort of one of the impacts this particular dream had, and the other, which has sort of surprised me a lot more in recent years, is the scientist himself has been this sort of character that I've grown and changed and developed quite a lot over the years, and it he's probably the main reason why I sort of go, it was a nightmare, but I've always viewed it, like looking back on it, as being a dream and a fairly good one. But qualify it more now as, no, it definitely was a nightmare. There's a particular character who does turn up in a lot of the stories again, being a multiverse. He's one of the few characters that does tend to cross over or get referenced or mentioned in various projects. When I initially started creating stories with him as a factor, he was very much a good guy. He was a mentor character. He was a fatherly figure. But there was a dark side to him. But that dark side, certainly in my younger writing, was like his evil twin. I know how cliche is that, but yeah, no. When he was sort of initially conceived, it was like he was two people. There was the good mentor, and then the evil twin. I could use stronger language there, but I don't know who's watching. Let's not swear on camera. So yeah, as a child and going into my early teens, it was almost like I had to see it as being black and white. There had to be this one good one and this one bad one. They couldn't possibly be the same person, even though they looked like. However, as I moved into my later teens and started to write things which were more grey, and were more, good characters who do bad things and bad characters who do good things, or, bad characters being motivated by good reasons or thinking that they are good and justified in what they're doing, even though what they're doing isn't necessarily a good thing. As that sort of came into my work a lot more and sort of crept into what I was doing a lot more, that's when the two halves of his character sort of came together, and the truth that it was always really just this one character, and he was never really a good guy. Well, depending on how you look at it, of course, because he's a character of grey. He's a character of greyness, and he very much exemplifies the idea of the greyness in my stories and in my characters and the way my characters develop. So the fact that he came out of this nightmarish dream, the idea that, the idea that something wasn't black and white, that something could be grey and could be a mix of both good and bad at the same time, very much is what that nightmare was and what that nightmare did. And even though it took me a few years to sort of properly process it, because it was always in my head, because it was one of those things that was so distinct, because sometimes dreams just they live on with you, and this happened to be one of those that did, and very much probably influenced the greyness and the uncertainty that I like to put into my working. I don't like things to be just, oh, this person is bad and they do bad things. It's kind of like, well, why are they doing the bad things? Is there some good reason behind it? Is there some way that they've justified it to themselves? And don't get me wrong, I do have characters that are literal psychopaths, and that's a completely different kettle of fish, because morality and stuff like that, it's completely different when you're dealing with characters like that. And I'm not saying that I don't still worry about it, I don't still consider, all the ins and outs of it. But when I'm talking just generally a character who is doing something bad, or who is the antagonist, and isn't necessarily 100% pure evil, considering the grey, considering the reasons, considering the motives is important. And I know it's weird to sort of like say, well, this dream is probably the reason I write like that, but I do think so. And as I said, it's primarily because of the one character that came out from that dream, that was created by that dream, that came into life and has been developed and has been worked on for so many years. And I think that if I didn't have him, if I didn't have that, I'm not sure that I wouldn't write very much in black and whites, especially writing in the fantasy genre, because traditionally it has had a lot of black and white to it. I mean, I know not so much nowadays, that the consideration that there is a grey, the consideration that there is moral ambiguity, is something that, as a modern culture and as a modern creative culture, people are much more aware of and much more willing to consider. But certainly, a lot of things that are aimed at children, a lot of things that, I was probably influenced by as a child, it was a very clear, this is good, this is bad, there isn't that in between. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I consider it important, and one of the reasons why I felt like I sort of needed to talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the dream that I really wanted to talk about, the one that I feel has had the most impact and most influence on me, and kind of the reason why I wanted to make, dreams and nightmares the topic of today's vlog. But obviously, that's not the only reason why I wanted to make this a topic, and it's because I find that, my dreams have had a big impact on how I write and how I devise scenes, because, like most writers, I might spend a few days or a few weeks thinking about a particular upcoming moment in one of my stories, in my work, and having a vivid imagination, having it sort of going over in your head so many times and changing and merging, both when you're awake and when you're asleep, you can find things about the scene, things about the moment, things about, how you want it to look and how it should look and how, all of that. It's incredibly useful. My vivid imagination is probably one of my most utilised tools when it comes to my writing, and I'm not saying you need to have that in order to be a good writer or to be a good creative person, because everybody does it differently and everybody has their own ways of doing it, and mine just happens to be my vivid imagination is key. Whereas for others, writing things down, plotting things out, and doing it in a sort of much more organised and much more constructed, literally constructed way, works great for them. And if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But for me, having that imagination, daydreaming and, actual dreaming and, the occasional nightmare does have a huge impact on how I write a scene and what the emotions going on in that scene might be, because having that sort of visual in your head sometimes is, or at least for me, is very important, because whilst I'm writing something, I like to think of my characters as, having their own lives, as actually being real, and not just thinking, well, this is where I want the story to go, but thinking, well, this is where the story is going, why is it going in this direction, and being able to sort of very quickly run through all these possible scenarios and all these possible ways that something can pan out, and by doing that, finding the right way is just how my brain works. To the point where, as I mentioned in the Echo blog, within 24 hours of having the very, very basic concept idea, I come up with everything else. Okay, I didn't know at that point where exactly the story was going to end up, but my brain, because it turns over ideas so constantly, both when I'm awake and when I'm asleep, it does help me come up with an image of how I want the book to go, and then it's getting that image from there to the page. I hope that makes sense. Who knows? I could be talking a load of crazy right now. So, yeah, in terms of how I create and how I go about writing, my imagination and my ability to sort of daydream and to cross those daydreams into my actual dreams and dream quite vividly at times is very important in my creative process. And as a, it also helps, I think, when you have to then write dream sequences, because I have written dream sequences for various stories and for various characters. In fact, the main project that I'm working on right now, which is turning into a little bit of an epic. I don't know at this point if it's going to end up as being one big giant book or several smaller books. We'll see. We'll see. It's still in its first draft. I haven't finished writing it yet. So what it will be, it will be. But yeah, in that, I've had a few dream sequences. Some of them, it's the same dream sequence that's been repeated, and then since a certain point, it's been one or two other different dream sequences as well. Sometimes they've been repeated, sometimes they haven't. But thinking about how you write that, thinking about how you get that across, being someone with a very vivid imagination and a very vivid ability to dream, does help make certain decisions when you are writing dream sequences, because you understand that the logic is a little bit off and a little bit different in dreams, but at the same time there is logic there is logic within the dream world, and you can't just have anything happen, because that doesn't necessarily reflect the nature of dreams itself. Yes, okay, anything can happen in a dream. That's part of the fun of dreaming for people who enjoy dreaming, and I'm somebody who very much enjoys dreaming. But at the same time, there's usually some sort of logic, there's usually some sort of rules within the context or the confines of that dream that as a dreamer you're not necessarily aware of. But if you were to have that same dream again, or have that same dream several more times, you might notice that actually this always happens and that always happens, and it's always in that particular way, and it's almost like there's a logic to it that I can't quite fathom yet. So when I'm writing dream sequences, I always have that in mind. I always have that as the sort of, well, this isn't just happening without cause or reason. There's probably a subconscious narrative going on within this moment and within this sequence that it needs to be within the subtext of what's going on, because when you're transferring the idea of a dream sequence onto page, you've also got to be aware of the subtext. You've also got to be aware that dreams are, from most people's understanding, a string of symbolic moments, a string of symbolic consciousness. So you've got to be very aware that you are trying to create on page that which goes on in reality, or dream reality. We'll come up with a good word for that. So dream sequences are amongst the more symbolic parts of a lot of my writing, but not necessarily, for the same reasons or in the same way as other parts of my writing. And yeah, it's interesting when I have to force myself to think about it. It's something that I am aware of. I mean, I don't write loads and loads of dream sequences, but I do enjoy writing dream sequences when I have to and when I can, because it does give you another perspective of the situation and of the characters in that situation, and it just focuses your mind in a slightly different way, and it's a way that my mind likes to focus itself, because as I keep saying, I do daydream and vivid dream and dream quite a lot. So being able to sort of take that and put it in place is something I do quite enjoy, and it's something I hope I get more opportunity to do. With that said, though, I think I've just about exhausted everything I can say about this today. But it's one of those things that I probably, when I'm talking about particular works, actually talking about particular works and actually talking about particular topics, I will be able to sort of expand on a little bit more, just because, it might be a bit more relevant. I hope this has been interesting. I hope that this, you feel that there has been some point to this, even if it's just listening to me ramble for 20 odd minutes. I hope it's not just been enjoying listening to me ramble for 20 odd minutes. I hope you've taken something away from this. I don't know what, but There we go. Anyway, I've been debating a little bit about what the subject of the next vlog should be, and I feel that it should be my fanfic series, that I should finally actually talk about the Tales Saga. Just because I do keep referencing it, I do keep mentioning it, so I feel like if I do it next, it'll be fun. And at least then, more of you will have some idea what I'm talking about when I'm referencing it, and yeah, it should be fun. And hopefully a bit more cohesive than today's topic. Anyway, that's it for today, and I hope to see you next time.